Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for another interview, a very special interview today, because I'm joined by the incredible Dr. Bill Bruford. Thank you so much for being here, Bill. It's a real privilege.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So I'm just going to do a quick introduction for anyone that may not be familiar
Sure.
with you and for your work. And then
Mhm.
I have a few questions and curiosities that I wanted to pose to you. So for anyone that doesn't know Bill and all the wonderful work he's been involved in, Bill is a hugely influential drummer. I think especially in the prog rock space in the 70s and 80s, but beyond that as well. Bill's played with Yes, King Crimson, Genesis, really a long list of projects. You have all of your own projects that you set up as well. So really a titan of the drums, very experienced drummer, but also very experienced interviewee. So I'm going to try and touch on topics that haven't been covered too much over the years, I hope.
Sure. Good luck with that.
Thank you. But I just wanted to first ask how you're doing and what you're up to these days, if there's anything you wanted to tell us about.
Oh, sure. How am I doing? Very well. But it's been slightly weird and been a certain amount of talk about it that I've been away from drumming for a long time. Actually, 13 years, which is quite a long time, to be honest. I stopped in 1960 with a kind of, I'd had enough, basically. It might be hard for some younger people to imagine this, but there comes a time when you don't actually ever want to see a drum kit again. There can come a time, shall I say, when you never really want to do much more drumming again. I think I was loosely burnt out, basically. And that would be more from administration in the jazz world than actually playing the drums. But touring and getting four musicians to turn up in Madrid on a rainy Thursday night at the same time is not always easy. And it's full of stress if you know anything about short-haul air travel in Europe. It's highly stressful. Look at Heathrow today, for heaven's sake. Just so you know, we're speaking today the day Heathrow is closed. Now, there are probably some band leaders with bands trying to get to a gig in Madrid tonight from Heathrow, or even tomorrow night, and they'll be messed up. And, you know, I have every sympathy with them, and I know how that feels. I stopped in 2009, I think, when I was 60. I spent some time in academia. I got a doctorate from the University of Surrey as a musicologist. I wrote some books and pamphlets and so forth, like you do. But 13 years later, in about 2022, I think, I just fell sort of violently and passionately back in love with the drum kit. Thought I'd been walking past it every day for about 13 years, thinking, you and I really ought to make friends. I used to say to it, you know. And like drum kits always do, they just sit there, you know, in my study.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So the kit was still set up that whole period.
It was, yeah, absolutely. And I barely touched it.
Yeah,
barely. In fact, I didn't touch it really. Then 2022, I decided to start again and formed a rehearsal band in my local town, and thought, who can I call? Who can I call to come and play? And Pete Roth was around, great guitar player. And funnily enough, he used to be my drum tech about 25 years ago when he was a student. And I always liked him a lot, thought he was a very good guitar player then. But 25 years later, I was astonished by how grown up and mature he'd become. So we started a rehearsal thing. Next thing, we had Mike Pratt on bass. And now we've got a pretty busy tours and gigs throughout Europe and Japan coming up shortly. So I'm pretty busy on the road, basically.
Wow, amazing. So, I mean, that's quite, 13 years off, and then you're kind of having this quite nice arc of seeing someone that was with you at a younger age as a drum tech.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering, 13 years, what triggered that interest, that second wind? But do you think it was?
Well, I think probably YouTube.
Okay.
I mean, YouTube has a lot to answer for in one way or another. And I think noodling around on YouTube, you think, oh, that's great. And this guy is terrific and that guy's fantastic. Why do they do that? That's terrible. And I could do that, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted to get stuck back in again, I think. I started practicing, but it wasn't. Everybody has said to me, oh, well, it must be just like falling off a bike. Not at all, really. I could remember some very tricksy, fancy stuff and some very simple stuff I wasn't so good at, but I was never very good at some simple stuff. And what I think is going to strike any drummer who's been out of it for a while through illness or any kind of absence is the loss of fluidity. It's the ability to stitch phrases together meaningfully and quickly, because they're right in the top, they're in the front of your head, much like I'm speaking to you now. So I rather hope I'm speaking in a rhythm I like, at a tempo I like. Sometimes I emphasize this, sometimes I don't emphasize that. And the ideas flow, we hope, as you're hearing in my speech. That's what you need in drumming too, or especially if you're making it up on spur of the moment and you're not just playing set patterns. You're going to need some kind of fluency as you go from this dynamic to that dynamic, this timbre to that timbre, this tempo to that tempo, et cetera, et cetera. So fluency, I think, and you get that by playing with people.
Yeah.
That is for sure the best method, I think. So you can watch all the YouTubes you like, but at the end of the day, it's what can you think up to play that's more important, really, than can you play it.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well put. I was kind of surprised. I did not expect the answer to what brought you out of this 13-year hiatus to be YouTube. But
well, me neither, really. I mean, there were probably other things, but I was just at a lull. I was slightly dissatisfied after 7-8 years in academic writing, and because that's basically pro bono, it's more or less unpaid,
right.
And it was heavy lifting. It's quite heavy work doing proper academic work. And I was just sort of mulling at my desk one day, and I thought, time to get back to it, Bill. Time to get back.
Okay, and it was that easy.
It was a very profound feeling, but not easy picking up a pair of sticks again. No, it took a while. It has taken a while. So, it's been 3 years now since I've been, practicing a couple of hours a day, getting back in the saddle.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think I speak on behalf of a lot of the drumming community that when I say that we're all very happy that you're back playing. So
you're too kind. I don't know what it's got to do with you. I'm very pleased. Very pleased for you.
Oh, thank you. One of the questions I wanted to ask was to do with, and I think you've kind of touched on it already, about YouTube and social media as a wider tool these days for drummers and all kinds of creatives. Certainly, the work we're doing at Drum Dog without social media would be so difficult, and we're trying to capitalize on the amazing reach that you can get on social media with connecting people and sharing drumming education things. And we're seeing these developments when it comes to AI. I wanted to drop AI into the discussion and get your thoughts on it, and what your feelings are in terms of a combination of AI and music. If we're heading in that direction where people are implementing AI more prevalently in music.
And how do I feel about that? Well, I'm not sure where I'm hearing it yet. I mean, insofar as things are copyable, at one end, the simple standard drum beat is, of course, eminently and quickly and easily copied by any kind of a computer, let alone whether it has artificial intelligence or not. However, at the opposite extreme, is such as the band I'm in, for example, Pete Roth Trio, there's three guys improvising, making music up on the spot. I don't really see how that any kind of artificial intelligence can impact that particular process. It might enable it to be easier in some way or another. I don't know, but I don't understand quite enough about it to know whether I would, be intrigued or horrified or anything. We make the music mostly for our own pleasure. If other people like it, and they do, then that's terrific. I think that's great, but we'd make it anyway. And we don't know what we're going to make quite before we make it. So you see what I mean? That's the very advanced end, which I would imagine artificial intelligence would have a hard time despoiling in any particular way. So I'm a bit on one side of this. I say that. However, my publisher did get in touch the other day and say they wanted to use some of my work in artificial intelligence. Did want to use. They were seeking permission from the publisher to use some of my work. This is literary work, however, not musical work, but about music, because I have written a couple of books about music. And I was okay with that. Sure, I think just the AI platform will just consume, the best, 500 books on the topic it can find, and throw them into the fiery furnace, and without any authorship and acknowledgement, and it just gets stewed around, and the computer will pick out the best ways in which the various concepts can be laid into a book, presumably, or into its own form. And I was okay with that. I don't mind that. But part of open access work is to have your work reach as many people as possible. And I don't mind whether it's credited to me or not in that aspect. With music, yes, I'd like a credit if that's possible.
Of course. Yeah, sure. I mean, that makes sense. The reason I ask is because obviously you've over the years developed a reputation for being very open to any new and developing technologies. You can see that in your kind of drum setup over the years, where electronic stuff being introduced, taken out, always changing. And I think there was also this hunger to just try out new sounds. And so I feel like the next phase is artificial intelligence. So I was just curious to see.
Yes, there is something of that in me, but you'll also be surprised to know that I'm hopeless with computers and technology generally.
Right. Okay.
So it's an odd thing, but I was happier in an analog world. I think I'm a digital immigrant, obviously, rather than a digital native, as they say. At my age group, of course, we're going to struggle a bit with advanced techniques and almost anything. So I guess the world I was in is rapidly slipping away. We're rapidly moving into a new, brave world. And I think the drummers are taking this on board, and how amazing some of the young drummers seem to be, and how the world of drumming has exploded forward as far as I can make out. It's not going backwards anywhere. It's very, very good. Percussion is everywhere, isn't it? Every ad I turn on, everything all over TV is nothing but percussion as far as I can make out. Amazing.
And I'm sure that's the way most drummers would want it.
Absolutely. Why not? Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you. One kind of more fun question, something that I was curious to know, going back to your, and I guess this applies to any phase of your career, whether you were with Yes or King Crimson or any other project. I wanted to ask about favorite tracks. If when you were with various groups and you had the set list for a gig and you're thinking, I can't wait to get to this track. I have a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah. Back in a distant past, I can't remember. We liked it. I liked the whole thing. I wanted to play everything all the time. I was full of energy and played everything far too fast, like a maniac on sort of cocaine and coffee. It seemed like it was not me at all, but I probably overplayed. I was full of energy and sure that I knew the right way that this song should go. With Yes, I think I always look forward to Heart of the Sunrise.
Okay.
Because it was a song that, if you don't know about the group, it was the song that was kind of the template for its biggest records. And in those days, you could have 3 or 4 albums. You could have 3 or 4 albums before somebody said, hey, come on, we need a hit record here. Otherwise, you guys are going down the tube. And just in the nick of time, we found a kind of template built around this song called Heart of the Sunrise, which gave the group a way forward. So, otherwise we were just kicking around in the weeds and in the bottom of the pond at that time.
Yeah.
But when we found that song, Heart of the Sunrise, as a template, then we could shoot off. We knew what to do. So every time that came up, I loved playing that. It was great. Great fun.
Amazing.
With King Crimson, tons of stuff. There were drum features. a thing called Indiscipline, was a pretty strong drum feature. And that gets you into all kinds of problems in a way about doing drum solos every night. You know, after about 30 different drum solos in a 40-night tour, you're beginning to think, hey, you know what? I don't have anything else to say on this drum set.
Yeah.
Played it everywhere. You're trying to amuse the bass player, you know, and give him something interesting that you didn't do 3 weeks ago. So I liked the ones with lots of action. And I also liked songs, and King Crimson was very like this, with minimal action. So there was one song I was just playing a portable log drum on, and I could wander around the stage and enjoy the concert from a different perspective than being nailed, you know, behind a drum kit. And then I ran a couple of jazz groups, the latest of which was called Earthworks. And, well, anything in that I enjoyed playing. I absolutely adored the group. I was probably the least proficient musician in it. One of the great things about being a band leader is you hire who you want. And of course, the best people to hire are people who are better than you are, who in some respect have more knowledge than you do about almost anything. So I had a group with some very talented musicians in, and I had to really work hard to stay in my own group because they were so good. And that was a wonderful group.
Nice.
So those things I think I remember.
No, I mean, I'm very, very happy you mentioned Indiscipline, because I had a specific question about that one track. So that's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Because it's I think it's safe to say it's my favorite King Crimson track.
Oh really? Well, you're a drummer. You like that.
I was gonna ask about I mean, in live versions, that opening section is kind of a lot longer than it is on the record version.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I first wanted to ask whose idea was that initially? Was it yours to play this kind of longer solo and then go into the track?
I can't remember. With many of these things in groups, you do something you want to do until somebody says, stop doing that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
King Crimson was a very interesting and open group. It seemed like a natural place for me to be the indisciplined one after we had a sister song called Discipline, which was the exact opposite, whereby the drummer was required to do almost nothing other than the sort of patter away at the background and not react with other musicians or in any way display terrorist kind of enthusiasm for all kinds of weird things on a drum set, which I was given carte blanche to do on the track Indiscipline. So you had the contrast of the two drummers, as it were, you know, the sort of renegade terrorist, the noisy young kid playing everything behind a drum kit, versus the very sophisticated Steve Reichian kind of percussion thinking that was going on. So it was a lovely band and had various aspects to it, such as that. And Indiscipline and Discipline were two sides of a coin. Lovely,
like a yin and yang.
Yeah, if you like, exactly. Yeah.
And another question I was going to ask about that section in Discipline is obviously it's you're very free, you're very open in your playing. It's we can call it a solo, but there's this kind of looped bass phrase behind it that you're playing off of and around and inside. I personally love that. I love having something to play off of. And I was wondering what your preference was and how you view having something looped to solo over.
Oh, I love it. I'm always soloing over some sort of riff or something repetitive, often with a dynamic from very small to very big, which is easy. So I'm better if I start small
okay.
and get bigger as the thing progresses. I love that. Yeah, but playing around and with riffs. So I very seldom do the old thing that I grew up with where, Ginger Baker in Cream would, settle down for a 7-minute drum solo and everybody else would leave the stage. Nobody ever left the stage in my drum solo, Why? Because nobody knew how long it was going to be for a start. And secondly, they were probably involved in some sort of a vamp over which I was playing. and that shows you the contrast. It's lovely for the audience to listen to that, I think.
I think so, yeah. I know I've been enjoying, and I'll say this to all of the viewers and listeners. Bill, you've got a wonderful library of content on your YouTube channel with lots of live performances.
220, I think, something like that by now.
There you go.
It's a lot of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's great that there's a kind of a directory that people can go to for lovers of your music and the groups you've played in.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled to do it too. I spend quite a lot of time thinking about the descriptions to these videos. Yeah. They have a little sort of box at the top that you can fill out.
Yeah.
But it can be quite long. So, on a weekly basis for the last couple of years, I've been doing, sort of 8,000 word or 1,500 word essays really on some topic related to the music. And I think that's given people a lot of interest in why I do the things I do. And half the time I'm just trying to explain it to myself. I write in order to organize my thoughts and to figure out what it is I'm trying to do. I do that quite a bit.
Interesting. I mean, I've noticed that. I've noticed because there was one video in particular. It was Indiscipline at the Warfield Theatre.
Oh yeah.
And the descriptions, like you said, they're written by you and they're very bespoke and they're very insightful. As I think you in the moment of writing it, looking back at yourself, in the moment of playing, wonderful. Especially because a lot of YouTube descriptions are quite generic. So having these ones that are very bespoke, I've certainly enjoyed them. So thank you.
Great. I'm very pleased to meet a happy end user.
There you go.
Terrific. Great.
One more King Crimson track that I wanted to mention, and then we can move on. And it was interesting that you brought up the idea of this duality between the tracks, Indiscipline and Discipline. The other one is the Talking Drum, which is maybe my second favorite King Crimson track. And I think that the drums there have a very different role. And I picture them as much more linear and more to do with energy and feel. But I'd be interested to hear your take. Obviously, that's my impression as a listener, but I don't know if you had any insight.
Yeah, very simple. It was really a kind of link to get from somewhere, from some song, as a big ramp up to an incoming song called Lark's Tongues in Aspic Part 2. And what we needed was some music that just went uphill in dynamics only. So the drums really aren't doing anything at all apart from providing a dynamic plateaus. So it starts very little like this. I'm waving my hands about, and I should really wave them on the screen so people can see. It sort of starts very low down here and ramps up at a steady pace to level 1, which point there's a little figure, dum 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 dum, and off we go again. It goes up a notch. Up we go again. Plays that figure again on cue. Somebody, I don't know how we knew that, but somehow we knew when to play it. Then it goes up again, so it's like going up steps.
Right. Okay.
And that's a lovely thing to do. And I find it quite hard to control my dynamics over 3 minutes from a whisper to a roar. I find that quite hard to do smoothly.
Yeah.
I know lots of people do, it's not particularly easy. So you're really whispering at the beginning. And by the end, you're really shouting,
Yeah.
And at no point have you really noticed anything much happen other than at these level jumps where it all goes up a bit.
Yeah.
So, once any musician, I think, knows what the music's about, such as I've just described, it's easier to play. It's easy to play when you know what the music's about. Indiscipline, I can play you. You call me to play on a track called Indiscipline, I'll play that. It's easy. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Without knowing what the music's about, I find it very difficult to play. So I'm not very good as a session musician, basically.
Okay.
I need some sort of emotional connection to the music to bring the best out. Otherwise, I can't think of what to play.
Right. And that connection and that kind of perception or judgment on your part of what the piece is about, is that something that you piece together individually, or is there an actual dialogue with whoever's written the piece?
It could be. Oh, absolutely could be. Sometimes I may have written it, so I can make it about whatever I think it might be about. Then again, what I think it may be about doesn't have to be exactly what you think it's about. As long as you're motivated, be my guest, if we're playing the same song. But you also need me to be motivated emotionally, to have some connection, so I understand what it is that I'm doing and what we're all doing here. And then I think the music is easy to play at that point.
And perhaps we're in the area that you referred to earlier, where you kind of play what you feel is right until someone else says, stop that. But I guess that, or would you say that's?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Musicians are subtle characters, and they have subtle means of letting it be known that what you're doing isn't quite right for the song, or isn't meeting with approval. Usually, what happens is that people leave the rehearsal room. That's always a classic. Gee, time to get some coffee now.
Okay, and then you hear the message loud and clear.
Yeah, you get the message.
Amazing. This one, forgive me, it's a slight cliche of a question, but I mean it genuinely, and I am curious if there was one piece of advice that you could give to young Bill Bruford, what would it be?
To young Bill Bruford, a piece of advice. Maybe don't be in quite such of a hurry. I think personally I was a bit of a hurry. I think at the beginning in music, you need to sit back a little bit and wait and look and listen. Above all, listen. And I think I was probably sort of overqualified and a bit too arrogant at the beginning. From very simple days, drumming back when I started was really a whole lot easier than now. You could pick down off the shelf, you could bring down a standard rock drum beat, perhaps a 3/4 swing, a bit of swing, and a bit of a shuffle for a rhythm and blues thing, and that was it. You were done. That's all you needed to be in most bands in London in 67, 68, that kind of era. But I had a jazz background, so I wanted to do more, and I wanted to ram stuff in, and I wanted people to like jazz, and all sorts of things. So I was in too much of a hurry, I think.
Right.
And I did move around pretty fast from group to group, which is, I thought, what musicians did. I didn't know I was supposed to, slit wrists with Mick Jagger and be Charlie Watts and be in the same band for 50 years. I didn't know that, that was rewarded and approved of by people. So I thought my job was to think of interesting things to do on a drum set and play them for you. And play them for the other people. And then when I'd run out of ideas or could find no new pastures or no new horizons in the band I was in, then it was my obligation, in fact, even duty, because that's what you're paying me for, to move on and find, a different frequency where I could operate and find other things to do.
Yeah.
So that's how I saw it.
And I'm sure, it certainly sounds like it was creatively stimulating, to jump from project.
Oh yeah, and I strongly recommend to all young Brufords, all young players, that at least once a year, maybe twice a year, you should be in a musical situation where somebody's counting the music in, when you are for sure, absolutely certain that you haven't a clue what to do. Because that's scary.
Yeah.
It could be a rehearsal room with great guys. It could be in a recording studio somewhere. But you've put yourself in a position where you're not sure how to play it. Okay. And then you really learn fast, I think.
Yeah, I imagine that it's a steep learning curve in those scenarios.
Yeah, and I think too many, if there's any complaints about younger players, too many stay within a sort of 120 BPM to 140 BPM kind of grid. And play the standard rock beat. And I'm always a bit disappointed with those guys, because the top cream of the top 10% of great players, the stuff that's going on up there is fantastic work,
Yeah.
And with hybrid drums and wonky beats and, all that stuff is terrific. There's so much meat going on at the top. But 90% of drummers, as we know, have to play a backbeat in a medium tempo 4/4, and I always find that a little bit disappointing when I see guys having to do it.
Okay, I mean that's great advice. Put yourself outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, maybe I'm gonna see if I can give that a go then.
It's not nice. It's not necessarily fun. Not necessarily fun.
Yeah, but it's helpful or effective at least.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Amazing. The last question then from me, Bill, is whether there was and this is kind of hypothetical question. If there's kind of I always picture it as like a white whale musician. If there's someone that you wish you could have had the opportunity to play with them, if it was a group or a sax player or a vocalist or anyone who you just really would have loved to have a day in the studio with playing.
Well, I think if he was that good and that interesting, I'd probably be terrified and too shy to ask him or her, to play with me in the studio. But I did ask some pretty heavy dudes to play, and they didn't actually say no, which I took as encouraging. And I'm referring to Ralph Towner, whose name you might not know, and Eddie Gomez, and we had a trio album in about 1990, somewhere around there, called If Summer Had Its Ghosts. But Ralph Towner is a real guitar star. If you're unfamiliar with his name, Ralph Towner. Okay. Go and look that up on YouTube, guys, and you'll hear some beautiful playing. Wonderful, wonderful musician. Jazz, of course, really, but one foot in classical music too. So I forgot what the question was, but it was a good question, wasn't it? Oh, yeah, but people I would have liked to play with. In a different time, in a different world, I absolutely adored Weather Report, of course, like we all did.
Yeah. And
we Earthworks supported Weather Report on a couple of occasions. And, Joe Zawinul was a grumpy old git, but boy, the ability, he'd play 4 chords, and you knew immediately who you were listening to. 4 chords. How can you do that? He owned the sound of his instrument, same as you would hope to play, 4 beats, 4 beat for 4 bars, and we would know it was you. Or you'd know it was me. That's what I think lots of us are after. That individual series of decisions over thousands of little decisions, which make me and make you.
Yeah.
And that's the great pleasure. I don't think we should all be the same at all. I think we should all do different things. And that's been a great pleasure trying to form a sort of personality. And of course, it's as much about what you don't do on the drum kit as what you do. So in so much as you play the same things as everybody else, you're kind of marking time, sort of wasting time, really, since the whole world was playing in 4/4 when I was 20 years old, I thought it might be good to play in 5/4, only because I would sound different. I'd immediately sound different, wouldn't I? Of course I would.
Yeah.
So, that's a very simple and asinine kind of example, but you see what I mean.
No, absolutely. I think you've touched on lots of really interesting stuff. I think, and I think this is particularly relevant for drummers, because on the keys or the guitar or an instrument that's more melodic, perhaps it would be easier to identify a player. Mm-hmm. Whereas the drums, I think there's even more requirement to try and have a sound that is Bill Bruford or Peter Erskine or whoever it may be.
I think so. I think people used to say to me all the time, "Oh, I love the sound of your snare drum." Well, I played hundreds of snare drums with different heads on all the time at different pitches, and they don't actually mean that. What they mean is they hear the sound of my drum, and the reason they hear the sound of my drum is because it's played in an unusual place in the bar. Usually, I didn't always play it on 2 and 4.
Right.
And people would say, "Oh, I can," So if the rhythm was somehow off kilter, it seemed a bit weird, something funny about it. Perhaps I was emphasizing 1 and 3, maybe not 2 and 4. whatever it was, the average listener, most of the people who ever heard any of my stuff would say, "Oh, that's a different kind of beat. I love his snare drums," sort of thing. They're not really referring to what they mean is they like the placement of the note.
Yeah.
So I used to place the note in slightly. I mean, I'm not talking rocket science here. There's slightly different places in the measure, and people would say, "Oh, that's unusual," and so forth. So that's how, you can make headway doing that sort of thing, I think. But somebody said, and it's a very true comment, I think, these days, is that, and it's part of the downside of YouTube, is that they're promoting these, fantastic young people, who can play 15 notes in the time of 11 nested inside a 3/4, which is nested inside a 2/4, that kind of thing. And one is, of course, hugely impressed by this. But much more important even than that, and there is a lot that's much more important than that, is what happens when you play live with other musicians. And what can you think of to play? Yes, of course, you could probably play the standard rock beat and get away with it. But that usually, most of the groups I've been in, you're looking at the third iteration or fourth iteration of that. Yes, you're going to do the standard beat. You start with that, and then you play the beat backwards, and you play it upside down. You take the middle section out of it, all that stuff. And you arrive 5 iterations later, you arrive at something that's slightly different to what the other guy would have done. And I liked those kind of groups. I wanted to be in those kind of groups. I didn't care whether it's called rock or jazz or anything like that. Tinkering around in that. And YouTube has this unfortunate way of just promoting absurdly high technology. Whereas the more interesting thing is, what can you think up to play? Not what can you play, what can you think up to play?
Yeah.
Especially if it's immediacy in the moment. Tonight at the Dog and Ferret, what's the Pete Roth Trio going to play? What am I going to play? I'd like to go with a reasonably, actually, I'm not playing the Dog and Ferret tonight, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'd like to go with a reasonably empty mind and a reasonably empty head and forget what I did 2 nights ago and view the music afresh, a bit like a child might.
Yeah.
Who's very good at that? Ari Hoenig. Ari?
I'm not familiar.
New York player. Again, Ari Hoenig, Hoenig. Okay. Please listen to Ari. There's a guy for you. Oh, yeah. Wonderful. He's probably got great technique, but I have no idea because what else he's doing is so wonderful and so enthusiastic and quite childlike, and so inventive. I do know that underneath all that, there is a very good player, yes. Yeah. But not in the conventional flash where you wouldn't find him, I think he does teach on YouTube actually, but he's comes from a great place. So there's a name for your area.
Incredible. I need to go back and make a list of all these names that you've cited. Thank you so much. And that's a great distinction as well. I agree. I think YouTube for drums and with so many other kind of niches of content, I guess when it comes down to what makes a title and thumbnail that would really draw something hyperbolic about a 3/4 nested in this played back, rather than just this is a really good groove with a great feel, and we're going to go through what you said, what you should play, or rather than what you are able to play or what you can play.
Well, what you can think up in the spur of the moment. What's going to come out? It's fascinating.
It really is, and I think the cogs in my head are already moving in terms of for Drum Dog, what kind of content we can create off the back of this thought, because this is fantastic.
What? Yeah, it's. I mean, there's the study of the technical study of the instrument, which is fine, which is a good thing here. But there's all this other stuff which people tend not to talk about very much. I think in many ways, you would get the Ari Hoenig trio and ask them to play a song that everybody knows, I don't know, a standard of some sort, Summertime or something, and see how they do that. And then in a perfect world, they'd all stop, and then they'd tell you why and how they're there and what it's for and how they got there, and why has he played that cymbal rather than hi-hat? Why is he playing that in twice the time the other guy is? And so on and so forth. Those kind of analyzing. In a way, I'm an analyst by nature, sort of getting into the meat and potato of the group, and going into the heart of the matter, seeing how the ankle bone is connected to the leg bone, which is connected to the knee bone, which is connected to, everything's connected to everything inside a group. And it's all going like this all the time. And you're trying to form it at the same time as, if you're not sure how the composition's going, you're trying to form it a bit like a potter at the potter's wheel. You know how they have that clay pot and they just put their hands there like that, and this pot kind of emerges, out of the top of their hands. And in a way, that's like playing jazz. If you were in the Erich group, that's the sort of thing you would be doing, and listening like crazy.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of music I like. That's what we do in the Peter Roth Trio. That's what we do there. That's what Erich does. And of course, it's only, I suppose, for fairly small type of audience. That's where musicians really learn how to be musicians.
I feel so captivated with the beautifully poetic and visual explanations that you're giving. So thank you, Bill.
Not at all.
One extra final quick one, because you kind of piqued my interest, as you mentioned, smaller, intimate venues where you would find this kind of improvisational kind of music. How does it feel playing in those venues and rewinding back to the back in the day when you're playing huge?
It feels right. The big touring days are not for me anymore. I was asked to join Beat, that the guys in the States playing the King Crimson music.
Yes.
You may have heard about that.
Yes.
Or not. It was a big tour, and they're going on 75 dates in a bus, and forgive me, but I'm not up for that.
Yeah.
That takes too long. It's too much repetition for me. So I'm the wrong guy for that kind of thing. I'm better in the kind of groups I've tried to describe for you at the Dog and Ferret. And yeah, it's going to be ugly. There's often not a dressing room. This may not even be a PA system, which is okay too.
Yeah. That's
fine. But then again, we do theaters as well. So, we can do up to 1,500 people, that sort of size. And I like that. I think it's important that you can see the audience, that I can see the whites of your eyes. I can see who you're looking at, what intrigues you, what doesn't intrigue you with the music. I like to see people kind of up close and personal, a bit like we are now. Up close and personal.
Yeah.
And I know everybody else in the band does too, and that's partly why we're configured that way. We set up very close to each other. Much closer than necessary on a stage. We don't do a big rock kind of thing, with the bass player 40 yards over there and the keyboard player there. We're a little trio. What's a trio? It's kind of,
Yes. Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great kind of place to leave it. And I'll also mention as well, I think you mentioned tour dates and your touring. People can find that information on your website?
That would be great. Nationally, no. What you want is PeteRothTrio.com.
Okay, I can link that in the description.
Pete Roth, www, of course, .PeteRothTrio.com. And dates and tickets and all that stuff are on there.
Okay, and if you're watching or listening and you see a town near you, please go buy some tickets.
Yeah, please do. Please come and hear us, guys.
Yes.
You don't have to be a drummer either. Normal citizens are allowed.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you again, Bill.
Right,
it's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure. Good luck with the website and Drum Dog. Good luck with this. It's looking like it's coming on well.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.